everybody. Welcome to the Mental Health and Wellbeing Global Summit. My name is Eric Forbes. I'm the founder of Wisdom for Life, and it's so wonderful to have you joining us today. I'm here with Cassandra Vieten. Cassie is with the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, who we've partnered with to present this event. And Cassie, it's just been a complete joy working over the past 6 months or so with you on this and putting together what I know we both think is a very important event and an event that's going to help a lot of people. And
thanks, Eric.
As we get ready to start this session, just want to share with our audience a little bit about you so you know a little more about your background. Cassandra Vieten is a senior advisor at the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation, which is co-hosting the Summit with Wisdom for Life. She served as its executive director from 2019 through earlier this year. She is now a clinical professor and director of the Center for Mindfulness at the Centers for Integrative Health in the Department of Family Medicine at the University of California, San Diego. She's also director of research at the Arthur C. Clarke Center for Human Imagination and clinical psychology director at the Psychedelics and Health Research Initiative at UCSD. She's a senior fellow at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where she served as president from 2013 to 2019. Her research has focused on spirituality and health, transformative experiences and practices, the development of mindfulness-based interventions for emotional well-being, and development of media technologies to inspire awe. She has authored 3 books, published numerous articles in scientific journals, and is an internationally recognized keynote speaker and workshop leader. And as I said at the top, Cassie, it's just so wonderful to be here with you today to kick off this summit with this opening session.
Oh, thank you so much, and welcome everyone. And Eric, it has been such a pleasure to work with you guys on this summit, and I feel really proud of what we put together and really hopeful that it reaches hundreds of thousands of people out there to get these amazing new ways of looking at mental health and well-being and tools that people can use starting right away into people's lives.
Definitely. Yes, our mission certainly with this event has been to open a lot of eyes around the world in terms of new approaches, and some that aren't new, some that are more traditional but often aren't talked about. And so with that mix that we have throughout these 7 days, there's really going to be a lot of a lot for people to learn and a lot of new practices that people can try. And so why don't we get into it with this opening session here? You just talk a little bit about kind of what led us to put this together. So the Brick Foundation, which I just mentioned is co-presenting the summit, which you're part of, really has a kind of a unique perspective when it comes to mental health. You just tell us a little bit more about what that perspective is and kind of the mission of the Brick Foundation and why you wanted to do this summit together.
Absolutely. And I've got to extend my real gratitude to Victor and Lynn Brick, who are the co-founders of the John W. Brick Mental Health Foundation. And you will be hearing from them in the next session. Victor had a brother, John, who died from complications of schizophrenia. And he actually received the best care available throughout his life at some of the top hospitals and, received psychotherapy, medication, frequent, repeated institutionalization over and over again. And then when he got out, he would decompensate again to the point that he needed to be put back in. And this is a story that many, many families have experienced. One of the things that surprised the Bricks is that not once was he offered a holistic plan of well-being that went along with the psychotherapy and the medication and the institutionalization. So it was almost like he was a passive recipient, but he wasn't given tools to empower himself, and the family wasn't given tools that they could use to elevate his mental health and well-being on a daily basis. And as the Bricks learned more and more about the field, they started to understand that there are actually dozens, if not more, approaches to mental health and well-being that are integrative, that combine self-care and healthcare, that rest on exercise, nutrition, mind-body practices, spirituality, art, creativity, joy, laughter, play, support, all kinds of things that are needed really to help us all with our mental well-being. We don't need to be schizophrenic to need some elevation of our mental well-being, the same way that we take care of our bodies physically through exercise and nutrition, the same way that we take care of our work life by dedicating tons of time to crafting a career or our artistic pursuits or hobbies. We need to spend the same amount of time and attention crafting what I like to call an ecosystem of mental well-being, a set of interlocking conditions and practices that can support our mental, emotional, and psychological resilience.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, of course, we all know that there's a mental health crisis going on right now in many parts of the world, and most of us have felt the effects of that, and probably almost all of us have been affected by it, whether personally because of our own mental health and well-being, or that of family members or close friends, work colleagues. And one thing and this is something in terms of us wanting to do this event together, it's something that you actually talked about in a recent TEDx talk of yours, that what we don't hear much about, we hear a lot about the crisis and the challenges, but we're not really hearing much in terms of, at least through, I would say, like the popular culture and mainstream media, around what's really a developing mental health renaissance. There's a lot going on. There's a lot that is changing around mental health, and there's a lot of reason to be hopeful. And in fact, that's one of the things that you and I specifically said in terms of this event. We want to give people hope. It's necessarily not false hope. It's hope based on a lot of evidence, a lot of science, a lot of proven methods and practices and techniques. And could you speak to that a little bit about what you like to call, which I love, the mental health renaissance that's underway?
Sure. Well, first of all, there absolutely is a crisis. There's no question about that. So we know that about 25% of people in any given year will be diagnosed with a mental health disorder, depression, anxiety, or worse. And the second leading cause of death of young people is suicide. And you just got to kind of let that rest for a moment. It's only about a month ago that the Washington Post published an article saying that 65% of young teenage girls had seriously considered suicide in the previous year. And somewhere around 20 to 22 of our veterans commit suicide every day. It just goes on. And there is something that's not working about our society and its approach to mental health, as well as our mental health care system. And we hear these statistics all the time. And especially during the pandemic, there was this interesting silver lining of us all being challenged at that level by the pandemic. And that was that more and more people started to talk openly about their mental health challenges. We're talking celebrities, athletes, late night talk show hosts. I mean, you've got elite Olympians being willing to say, I'm not ready to compete today because my mental health is not in the place I want it to be. NFL athletes, people on TV being able to say, I'm depressed. We had just a few days ago, John Fetterman, senator in Pennsylvania, who openly had just been discharged from Walter Reed Army Medical Center and said, I was in for depression and this is what I went through and this is how I helped myself out of it on national television. These are things that are unprecedented. So it's unfortunate that we have the crisis, but in a way, just like in our individual lives, there's something good that can happen when we start to sort of hit a bottom. And I think that's happening now. And so the mental health renaissance is what is less talked about in the media. And that is that there are so many new ways of looking at mental well-being, emotional well-being, psychological well-being that are making their way into science, into healthcare, into the mainstream. podcasts and TikTok channels. I mean, all kinds of places. People are sort of bubbling up with this brand new way of looking at mental health and well-being. And so it's kind of exciting. And I actually believe that 10 years from now, well, it'll be unrecognizable the way we think about and talk about mental health when compared to today. I think that more and more people will be talking about it openly, just like we talk about other physical conditions that we don't have shame about. There isn't a stigma about saying I broke my arm or I got in a car accident or, my cholesterol is high. And that I think the care will be completely different. In my TEDx talk, I talked about the prescription pad and how we don't just want it to have a medication on it. We want it to have a prescription for connection, support, peer groups, nutrition, exercise, and spirituality. Or if you're not a spiritual or religious person, connection with meaning and purpose and humanistic values like justice or truth or beauty, like really getting back in touch with your orienting principle or your true north. And so I have a lot of optimism about where we're going with mental health. And I think we all need to be talking about it more. And the purpose of this summit is to get trustworthy information and tools out to the general public, out to professionals who may not be hearing about it because it's overshadowed by the crisis.
Yeah, indeed. And what are some of the ways, Cassie, that you feel like people as part of the general public are how they're starting to see mental health differently? Like, what are some of the hopeful signs? Of course, you talked about how people are more openly talking about it, which is awesome. So destigmatizing.
There's that.
And what else?
There's also along those lines, we used to kind of think of mental challenges, emotional difficulties, psychological moments as being abnormal. That you're born into the world, you have your life experiences, and normal is good mental health. And not normal is this very small, tiny proportion of people who, often in a whisper, they have, and that turns out to be absolutely not true. That mental health challenges, diagnosable and just under the level of the diagnostic limit. So what we as clinicians call subclinical, which just means that you have stress, you have nervousness, you have depressive symptoms or anxious symptoms, or you have other kinds of weird obsessions. We only thought that it was a small group of people who had these because people didn't talk about it. Now that people are talking about, we're realizing, as Gabor Mate, who's in our summit, says, normal is a myth, the myth of normal, that there's a spectrum of mental health and we all are traveling it all the time, up and down, based on our life circumstances, our previous experiences, our genetics. And it's definitely true that where you start on that spectrum is a combination of your life experiences and genetics. So you might tend towards being more distressed at times, more reactive, more sensitive. You might tend towards being more resilient or just kind of a generally more content and happy person. But we still have the ability to move ourselves up and down this spectrum based on how we take care of ourselves and the kinds of practices that we engage in. So that's one way that it's all of us. If we are not ourselves someone who has faced any kind of mental health challenges, the rare person who hasn't ever, we at least know people who have, our kids, our family members, our partners, our parents, our coworkers, our colleagues. Every one of us is affected by mental health.
And what are some of the new approaches to mental health and well-being that you're most excited about, Cassie?
Well, I think that our approach to mental health and well-being has generally been right here. It's above the neck. It's between the temples. And we think it's all in our minds and all in our brains. And so that has been the major focus for quite a while now, is we're just going to find the right broken brain chemistry and fix it. We're just going to find the right broken thinking and fix it. And don't get me wrong, those two things are important and they have helped me in my life. And so not putting that down at all, But mental health goes much further than that. It's a whole body affair. Our hormones, our genes, our nervous systems, what we eat, our gut health, the way we move our body, the way that we interact with other people, what we consume, what we think about, what we read, what we view, all of these things, our cultural norms, our, privilege and oppression, all of these things feed into our mental health and well-being, our spirituality. And so the idea that we should focus 95% of our treatment right here doesn't really make sense. We've got to focus our treatments on the whole person. And so those are the things that make me excited. Let's give an example. At the John W. Brick Foundation, we've focused a lot on exercise as a way to improve mental health. Now, I'm a psychologist. I can tell you for sure, I didn't receive any training in fitness, exercise, the way that moving our bodies affects our mental health. And now what we know is that we've conducted a review of over 30 years of research that shows unequivocally for depression that prescribing exercise and movement for depression is equivalent to antidepressants in most cases. And imagine what we can do if we put them together. And so just that right there, just saying, okay, you've got depression going on. It seems to be, hanging on. We're going to give you potentially medication therapy, but we're also going to set you up with a trainer who's been mental health trained, and they're going to meet with you over the next 3 months to get you moving. We know that this is going to help. Now that is a big deal. That sounds kind of vanilla actually, right? But it's not being done. It's just not being done. So that's exciting. But what's even more exciting to me is the further reaches. We are talking in this summit about the reemergence of psychedelics as a tool in medical care that can fairly reliably, under the right conditions, induce experiences that absolutely change people's lives, that people refer to as one of the top 5 most important experiences of their lifetimes, and show extended effects on well-being, on depression, on quality of life, on feeling content. In fact, there's even evidence showing psychedelics changing personality traits, which were previously thought to be pretty stable over the life course. We talk in the summit about transcranial magnetic stimulation and being able to use that technology that uses magnetic and energy fields through the brain to shift the way the brain is working in ways that are allowing for people who have had sort of a darker view of the world for their entire lives to have that veil lifted and be like, oh my God, I feel so much better. Ketamine, these are some interesting new approaches. Hot and cold therapy. Some of you have heard of Wim Hof, who's also on the summit, as well as a couple of researchers who are deeply involved in how exposing our bodies to cold plunges, ice baths, cold showers, combined with breathing exercises, changes our chemistry, changes our mood. And that's pretty amazing. Also hot, which is kind of great for me because it completely justifies my constant need to visit hot springs and take baths. And now I can see it as a health practice that also sitting in saunas seems to have an effect on the body that affects the mind. Probably one of my favorite parts of the summit was geek therapy, where we're working with adolescents now. And instead of seeing their video gaming or their obsession with, comic books or the Marvel universe or the DC universe as a distraction or a problem, we're saying that is actually their mythology. If we can leverage what is captivating them about these worlds and use it in their therapy to help them identify with the protagonist and help understand their relationships with their parents and other characters, other friends, how exciting is that? So that, and gosh, probably 25 more things we talk about in the summit. So there's just so much going on.
Indeed, there is. And well, how about, can you talk a little bit about the science? Because obviously the science is really important in terms of being able to provide, some validity, let's say, to these practices. Can you talk a little bit about some of the science that's emerged?
Yeah, well, you mentioned that some of these practices are actually not new at all. They have been around for millennia. What is new is having scientific evidence gaining steam to assess their effectiveness in various conditions and also peek into what is the mechanism. Why does exercise help with mental health? Well, we know that part of the reason is it activates BDNF and it reduces inflammation. And this is a direct pathway to changing things in the brain. And so one of our days is focused on body, mind, and energy. And energy work, for example, biofield science, where we look at different practices like Reiki, which is energy healing, EFT or tapping, which is thought to be approaching the meridian, the same kind of energy meridians on the body that acupressure or acupuncture does, but people do it themselves through tapping the various acupressure points. And they do it while they are repeating to themselves positive phrases, or maybe even while they're sharing with a therapist something difficult that's happened for them. Look, I don't know exactly how that works. And initially, even I, who am kind of interested and open minded in a lot of new approaches, was sort of like, that seems kind of weird. I did a program at a homeless shelter. It was a place for shelterless folks who were in transition. And we brought in a ton of different kinds of exercises and practices. And somebody volunteered to bring it in. So I was like, okay, let's give it a shot. And I'm telling you, the people were like, oh my gosh, I've slept for the first time through the night. I feel so much better. Now there are over 100 studies, randomized controlled trials with, with blinding, all of the stuff that we need for a study to show evidence that are supporting these kinds of practices in helping with mental health and well-being, and not just self-reported mental health and well-being, but also biomarkers, gene expression, the way the brain functions, heart rate variability. It's just amazing.
Tell us a little bit about an important part of your own work has been around spirituality and mental health. Maybe share a little bit about that and its relevance to mental health and well-being.
Yeah, so spirituality is, distinct from religion. There is a big overlap there. So most people who are religious also would rate themselves highly on spirituality, where some people who are spiritual would not rate themselves at all high on religion. So you can be spiritual but not religious, or you can be both. And as I mentioned earlier, even if you don't identify yourself as spiritual or religious, you may have humanistic values that are very important to you, like truth, beauty, justice, honesty, gratitude, service, things like this. Now, these are incredibly important aspects of people's lives. And there is research showing that if you ask someone who's dealing with mental health challenges, what are your number one coping skills? There's a huge proportion of them that will say, it's my spirituality, it's praying, it's meditating. Or you ask someone, what is it that you orient your life around? How do you make meaning of life? They'll say, I orient my life around my spirituality, or I make decisions based on my spiritual principles. Now, again, the majority of mental health professionals will rarely ask about these domains of people's lives. And it's sort of like, let's keep that spiritual, metaphysical stuff away from the real science and, what's real. When the truth is, there is now a whole huge scientific literature showing that the relationships between spirituality, religion, and mental health are very, very strong, and that it's time to start including this in how we think about people's mental health. It's time for us to start inquiring about it. It's time for us to start collaborating with spiritual leaders and clergy to work together to help ourselves and our clients or our friends and family members. So it's really trying to break down that invisible wall between psychology and mental health care on one hand and spirituality on the other hand. So I've been working hard with a large group of people, and am co-chairing the Division 36 task force at the American Psychological Association to provide a set of guidelines for how mental health professionals should address spirituality. Outside of that, though, if you're watching, you can sort of create this ecosystem for yourself. And one of the elements of those ecosystems should be, how do I connect to something larger than myself, whether it's religious or spiritual or something based on your values? How do I connect to something larger than myself? Because a lot of depression and anxiety comes from brain chemistry. It also comes from not feeling a sense of meaning, really feeling like, what the hell is this all for? What am I doing here? What am I doing here? Why do we have people and we lose them? Why is it that, to the best of my ability, I want to quit drinking or quit these difficult behaviors that I'm doing, and I can't no matter what? These are big existential questions, and they require big existential responses.
Mm. Another area that you've really worked on that kind of ties into this is awe. Can you talk a little bit about awe and its power to help us in terms of our well-being?
Yeah, well, we talk a lot about what we need to subtract from our lives to have better mental health and well-being. We need to get rid of our symptoms. We need to get rid of our addictions. We need to, reduce our neurosis, all the stuff, get rid of that stinking thinking, all that stuff. We don't always talk as much about what we need to add. And there are these, I wouldn't go as far as to say antidotes, but in a way I want to say awe, wonder, enchantment, mystery, beauty. Really awe in particular allows you to open up your aperture. Let's say you're looking at the Grand Canyon. Looking at the Grand Canyon forces you to open up your peripheral vision, because the whole thing can't even fit in a narrow-minded perspective. You've got to open up your peripheral vision. And this is what's true in so many times that we're, suffering with anxiety or suffering with depression, is that our focus has become one thing. What did I do wrong today? Or what did so-and-so do to me? Or, I just can't stop thinking about this problem or this fear. That is the key to so many mental health problems. And so what we want to do is open that perspective up, widen it out. We even, in some of my research, use virtual reality to lift people all the way up from Earth, all the way up even to space, and try to gain some perspective on, oh my gosh, this problem that I have been ruminating and chewing about for days and days and days really isn't as big as I think it is. It's eclipsing all of my awareness. But when I make my awareness bigger, it becomes right-sized, I guess is a good way to say it. So at the Brick Foundation, in addition to exercise, nutrition, mind-body practices, we're also very interested in introducing joy, play. Lynn Brick does laughter yoga. And, it's one of those things that you think, well, that sounds kind of silly, right? She'll get a room of people laughing their heads off. And afterwards, you can feel in your body and in your mind, in your whole being, this effervescence. And those are the kinds of things that I do think tend to be antidotes to these darker moments, but we don't use them enough.
Speaking of the laughter yoga, I don't remember if we ended up including that or not, but each day we have, of course, as you know, I'm just sharing with the audience, we have there's one practice called Moving Your Mental Health. And so you'll see that on the page here, along with all these sessions. And they're maybe 10-ish minute videos with a short exercise or practice for you to do that involves movement. And I don't remember if we ended up including one on laughter yoga or not, but there is a whole variety of them. And so I hope that everyone will really take advantage of that and look at those videos and do the practices and just see how you feel, see how it changes how you feel, by the time
Yeah. And
and
it's amazing
incorporate that more into
sometimes.
your daily life.
Yeah, and it's amazing sometimes how short these practices can be. We have Amishi Jha on the summit, who's the author of Peak Mind, and the subtitle of her book is long, but it basically says 12 minutes a day is the practice you can do to really shift a few different, very important aspects of how you direct your attention. And just like that perspective I was just talking about, how you direct your attention is another one of those core elements. If I have my attention captured by what's wrong, either inside of me or outside of me, and it always tends to get grabbed by what's wrong, I'm not going to feel so good. But if I can learn to hold my attention sort of like a flashlight or a searchlight and direct it to what I want to direct it to, that changes everything.
This has been really good. Can you talk a little bit about what you envision as the future for mental health and well-being? I mean, we've talked a little bit about, kind of what's been happening and where things are heading. Can you talk more about that in the future?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Victor and Lynn Brick will talk about is one of the models that drives our foundation is called the dual continuum model. And we've already shared together this continuum of mental health from high symptoms to low symptoms, let's say, or high resilience to low resilience. But there's this other spectrum that has to do with mental well-being. And this is why we call this the Mental Health and Well-Being Summit, because mental health, important, very important. Mental well-being is something you can have whether you have low symptoms or even if you do experience high symptoms. The low mental well-being is like this languishing, whereas the high level of mental well-being is flourishing. And one of the things I think will change about mental health is instead of solely focusing on eliminating symptoms, which is just not always possible, we can figure out how to navigate the symptoms, creating conditions, creating practices that allow people to flourish even if they tend towards having disorders. So I think that binary will start to fall apart. I think that, the truth is, I actually believe that we are all sort of a very strange bundle of stuff. Like all of us are. And wouldn't it be interesting if early in life, now when I was a kid, we learned the 4 food groups. That's kind of evolved to the plate method and, different kinds of recommendations. But it was really taught to us very strongly from early on. I want to see mental health and well-being, holistic, integrative mental health and well-being skills taught from a very early age so that preschoolers, kindergartners, elementary schoolers can say, I'm feeling really down today, so I'm going to take I think I'm going to take a few minutes to do my breathing. Just that it becomes an absolutely obvious part of life and that we all begin to support each other in it. And I think that has a ripple effect that goes much further than individual well-being or even familial well-being. One of the phrases that we've probably all heard is that hurt people hurt people. And so as we heal the hurts that people experience psychologically, emotionally, mentally, through this much more holistic approach that starts earlier, it doesn't wait until it's a crisis, it starts from day one, that becomes a normal part of life, I believe that we will have a beneficial effect on elevating the well-being and quality of life of all of us. And, to get even broader, the way we treat the planet, the way we treat each other, the better all of our mental health and well-being is, the better the health of everything will be. So that's what really keeps me getting up in the morning.
Wonderful. Can you just talk a little bit about conditioning? Because I mean, a lot of times, perhaps, we might not think about, oh, we need to do something until we're not feeling so well. But can you just talk a little bit more about that, about how we can do these things on an ongoing basis to really condition ourselves so that we don't end up facing some of the challenges that we might have faced. And then at that point, start thinking, oh, what can I do about it now that I'm already feeling this way?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's very, very important to first of all, start with prevention. And one of our speakers is Alyssa Epple, who's also on the scientific advisory board of the Brick Foundation. And she and I did a study together where we worked with pregnant women and new moms, and we were training the pregnant women in mindfulness and healthy eating and healthy movement before their babies were born. What we found was not only did it help the women, but the babies, when they were born, had less stress reactivity and fewer needs for doctor visits and things like that. So, I mean, we can start very early. And then the next level is to think about when we first begin to see signs. I'm feeling depleted. I'm starting to think negatively. I'm starting to, have these negative self-talk, like whatever our red flags are, that is a good time to be like, whoa, how's my ecosystem going? So as we go through this summit, you can actually go to johnwbrickfoundation.org/build. We'll probably put a link on Everyday's page to a printable ecosystem where you can start to fill in the blanks of each one of these little sections. And then if you choose to take our follow-up course, we're going to go very deep into creating your own customized ecosystem of mental well-being.
Yeah, you're going to be leading a 6-week live online course that's going to start, I believe it's on May 2nd. So starting maybe 2.5, 3 weeks after the summit ends. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And it's a great response to your original question, which is sort of like, okay, here's all this potpourri of tools and information we're giving you during the summit. And I hope you do sort of take notes and take it down and choose which pieces work for you. But what we'll do in the course is actually use the ecosystem of well-being with the chart that we use that has the different aspects of all of these things that we've talked about. And you can start to actually build a written ecosystem that's like, okay, here's my bubble. Sometimes I like to think of it just like a garden grows. What type of soil do I need? What kind of nutrients? What's my sunshine? What's my water? What are the stakes in the ground that I need to grow on? All of these things, do I need more sunshine? Do I need more shade? It's a metaphor for being able to build your own ecosystem of well-being and mental health. And when you start to see one of your plants wilt or die, you're like, wait a second, maybe it's getting too much water. Maybe it's not getting enough water. You can look at your own ecosystem and say, oh, I see, I'm not actually doing anything right now for my spirituality. That might be what's throwing me off. Or, ooh, I haven't exercised in like a week and a half. Okay, maybe that's why I'm feeling a bit down. So you can start to calibrate your own group of practices. And I don't want anyone to feel like this is going to be a giant New Year's resolution list. We know how well that works, right? It's really about doing 1 or 2 of these things every day, 10, 15 minutes, sometimes even 5 minutes, really saying, this is how my mental well-being works. And if you're a professional, being able to help your clients do that. So the course will focus on taking all the information from the summit and being able to create your own customized, personalized ecosystem of mental well-being that then you can use to be a map to guide you maybe for the rest of your life, or to help your loved ones, help your family, help your clients build one of their own.
Nice. And for everyone who's interested, and I encourage everyone to take a look, to check it out, you can scroll down the page and you can see all about the course. Cassie, as we come close to the end of our time together here right now, maybe could you just share a little bit more, anything that comes to you that you think would be especially helpful for people around their mental health and well-being And anything else about the summit itself that's coming up that you think you'd like to just kind of highlight right now?
I really just want to come back to the heart and say that we know that a lot of you who are watching and people who aren't watching are suffering or having, big suffering or, some suffering, a little bit of suffering, whatever it is, you are absolutely not alone. Everyone is here with you. I want you to feel like this summit is thousands, tens of thousands of people who are at your back, supporting you, being your cheerleaders, saying, hey, choose a few of these things that work for you. See if you can open your mind to a new way of thinking about your own psychological diversity, neurodiversity, saying, hey, man, this is how I'm built. These are the cards I was dealt. How am I going to navigate that? What am I going to do? And I'm just hoping that whatever we offer during this summit can be a number of ways that you're like, okay, I think I could do that, or that sounds interesting. I want to learn more about that. I sometimes say life is a little bit like an obstacle course, and we can spend the rest of our lives trying to get rid of all the obstacles, or we can spend our time becoming more strong, agile, and nimble to be able to navigate those obstacles and to get some friends to help us, because a lot of those obstacles you just can't get over by yourself. Maybe sometimes even professionals, I've definitely taken advantage of it. And so that's a shift. How can I navigate the rest of my life in a way that prioritizes my mental, emotional, and physical well-being, psychological well-being, becoming more agile and nimble as I move through the obstacle course of life or the ups and downs of life, and know that there are so many people who are linking arms with me and doing this with me. So let's all do it together.
Beautiful. And we have a private Facebook group, everyone, that I encourage you to check out and be part of. Everyone who's registered for the summit can join. There's a link in the email that we send out every morning that you can just click on and automatically join because you're attending the summit. And that's really a wonderful way for people to be able to connect with each other, support each other throughout the summit. And I hope you'll check that out and be part of it. Cassie, as we finish up now, how about, I'm just thinking, what about if could you lead us in a couple of minutes of practice, just kind of getting ourselves maybe into our bodies a little bit.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Quieting of our minds, just becoming present.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talked about just a little bit ago was the shift in perspective. And one of the practices I'll teach today is that, sometimes when we're having really big thoughts, really big reactions, big difficult emotions, it can be like a balloon blowing up in a bread box, and it just takes up every single part of our being. Every part of our awareness is full of whatever it is: anger, fear, shame, worry. We're not really trying to get the balloon to stop blowing up. We're trying to make the bread box into the size of an airplane hangar so that you can still have the stuff that goes on with you, which is good news because you probably can't make it stop. But you want to increase the size of your container so that even when it does happen, you've got practices, you've got abilities, you've got help to just be able to be like, yep, that's what's happening right now. So why don't we take a minute and try it? If you are in a safe place to be able to close your eyes, you can allow your eyes to close. And if you're not, you can just open them and soften your gaze. And see if you can straighten your spine a little bit, as though there were a string that was going from the center of the earth all the way through the base of your spine and out the top of your head. Just like someone was tugging on the top of that string a little bit to lengthen the back of your neck and tuck your chin in, and drop your shoulders, and take a long, slow, deep breath in through the nose. And then an even longer breath out through the nose or the mouth. Breathing out more fully than you normally would. Take a few breaths like that. And every time you breathe out more fully than you normally would, allow where you're sitting to rest even more deeply into the chair, the couch, if you're lying down, wherever you're lying. And on the next out breath, allow your entire attention to rest into your body and into this present moment, as though you were resting into an old, easy chair. Allow your attention to saturate your entire body from the top of your head to the tips of your fingers to the tips of your toes. And I want you to imagine now that any of your body sensations that you're noticing right now, any of your thoughts or feelings, are kind of like weather patterns in the sky. All your experiences are kind of like fluffy clouds. Or if you're feeling sort of muted, it's a foggy sky. Might be angry and having a thunderstorm, lightning. Or you might just have a very clear mind and body right now, like a blue, blue sky. But these weather patterns are your thoughts, your feelings, and your body sensations, and they're always changing, just like the weather. And you are actually the sky. You are not your sadness, your anger, your moments of joy and happiness, your pains in your body, your difficult emotions or your positive ones. They are all moving through your being, and your being is like the sky. And imagine yourself expanding so much that you feel like you're as large as the sky. You know that tomorrow there'll be some weather patterns that move through you, just like there were yesterday and the day before that, and every single day of your life. And that there will be weather patterns moving through you every day for the remainder of your life. But you are the sky. You can feel them. You know they're there. But they don't define you. And they don't necessarily need to drive your decisions. As the sky, you can be like, look at that thought I'm having. That's a big one. Or, whew, there's a big emotion rolling through. You can use these experiences to inform you. Having a big thunderstorm inside. I wonder what's going on right now. And you can even start to appreciate the variety, thoughts and feelings and emotions and body sensations that appear in your being and disappear, just like you can learn to appreciate the weather, not really resisting any of it. just getting an umbrella when it's raining, seeking shelter when there's a big storm, and basking when it's beautiful and sunny or the warm rain is coming down, savoring those moments. So feel free to stay with this being the sky for as long as you like. And when you feel ready, you can come back into your body, rub your hands together, and feel yourself back in this moment.
Hmm. Thank you so much, Cassie. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who's joined us. We have 61 sessions for you over these coming 7 days. A lot of really important conversations.
Oh, and I did want to mention one thing, Eric, that I do have a few co-hosts. So Lynn Brick of the Brick Foundation has been kind enough to interview a few of our folks. Shamini Jan, who's a lovely colleague and friend, founder of the Consciousness and Healing Initiative, also has done a few of the interviews. And my colleague and friend, Michael Sapiro, has done some of the interviews. And so we are your hosting team, and everyone was pretty excited about being part of this.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to all of your co-hosts as well. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Hope you have a wonderful day. There's a lot to take in. There's a lot to learn. Just do it at a pace that works well for you. And just wishing you all a wonderful rest of the day and a wonderful rest of the summit.
Mm.
Bye.